Welcome back, everyone. We're going to give a beat as people come back into the main room. We hope you had good discussions. Welcome back. Terrific. So I wanted to invite everyone, first of all, to feel free to put anything that resonated about the conversations you just had with each other into the chat. I want you to know we're collecting the chat. We're going to synthesize this. It's going to be part of the archive of this recording that everybody's going to receive. So it's important. What resonated? What do you want us to know? What do you want to codify in some way? If somebody from each of the rooms would give a shot or whatever bubbles up, do put it into the room. Before I do the next introduction, which I'm thrilled to do, I also want to say something important. And I think our speakers got to this. You heard both Ken and Jay speak both as experts, but you also heard them clearly share their personal opinions on things. This is a movement. We know you're part of the movement. We know we have so many field practitioners amongst us who are doing the work day in and day out. We know how passionate we all are about this work together. This is a movement like the civil rights movement, like the women's movement, like the environmental movement. We cannot meet the profound challenges of our time without addressing this huge, huge topic. Innovating in real time, having community in real time, and being able and willing to walk in the wilderness of not knowing and doing the best we can. And I also want to say that B3 as a network is the hub, is the way that we're aligned and pulled together. So we really encourage you, if you're not part of the B3 network, become part of it, because the whole point is to bring us together. Okay. And thank you for those who are putting in some things in our chat now. It's a wonderful summary from Delia. Appreciate that. Again, we're going to collect it. For the sake of time, I am going to introduce our next speaker. We are so pleased to hear from Sarah Eisenman, who is our Chief Community and Jewish Life Officer from the Jewish Federations of North America. Sarah will be sharing findings from our recent research project on the aging landscape. We really invite you to put questions in real time. First, Sarah's going to make a presentation, and then we're going to have a Q&A with Sarah. But again, don't hesitate. What resonates? What questions? What are things you want us to know? Put it into the chat. Sarah, I'm so pleased to welcome you. And and there you are.
Great. Thanks, Jess. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And it's great. It's a pleasure to see so many people on this morning. And kudos to Stuart and David for making this a real ritual each year. So we're thrilled to be a part of it. A little disclaimer, I had a terrible fever last night, but I wouldn't miss this for the world. So I'm gonna, do my best here with this and hopefully get through the deck just fine. But if I miss something, you see something, please flag it for me. I'm not totally 100%, but I'm gonna fake it till I make it here. So it is a pleasure to be with you. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to try in about 30 minutes here to take you through really some just quick hit high level findings from a recent study we did. And let me pull this up. Give me 1 second to hopefully not mess it up. Okay, great. So just to start out, from the Jewish Federation side, we started looking into this whole topic around, we've been using midlife, 55 plus engagement. We, totally agree that the language is tricky. So we're trying on the midlife phrasing, but open to feedback. And we started looking into this because our whole focus on the Community and Jewish Life division of JFNA is really focused on how we can reshape and increase engagement in Jewish life. And many people know federations are probably the largest or major investor in Jewish life here in North America. And when I first started in this role about 2 years ago, doing a listening tour of federations, I just kind of would casually ask, is there any demographic in your community that you're really worried about, that you feel is kind of being left behind, that, we don't have the right opportunities for? And I come from a strategic planning background and then doing a ton of young adult engagement work. And I thought to myself, here we go again. I'm going to hear all about young adults. Not that I don't love young adults, but I thought, okay, we'll hear more of the same. And that wasn't the case. What I heard over and over again from community after community was about whatever language they used: empty nesters, boomers, 55 plus, active aging, all different language. But in some way, they were talking about the same people and feeling very concerned that we just don't have it right in terms of the engagement of those folks in our community. And that's led to a whole year of work, basically doing a deep dive into this space, really understanding all the demographic trends, really understanding all of the people who've come before us, doing the work, shaping this space, and then looking outside the Jewish world. We heard about Chip Conley, Modern Elder Academy. We actually have a test program coming up that we're running with the Modern Elder Academy of a Jewish cohort at their campus in Baja. So again, we're trying to learn, we're looking into this with the hope that we will identify a few key directions that we can test and hopefully get to scale around the country is kind of where we're headed. So quickly, I'm going to jump into this research. This, to be clear, was a piece of work carried out by the Benenson Strategy Group, who are really well known in the political polling space. So they are really good at doing quick temperature checks of different demographics and understanding kind of what's making them tick. This is not an exhaustive national study that takes months and months and months in interviews. This was a survey conducted for Jewish adults between the ages of 55 and 74. It was conducted in a 1-week span. They hit the number they needed. They got over 500 respondents in order to make it representative. It was a 10 to 12 minute survey that someone would click on through a text message. And so, this is a quick temperature check. It's more of market research than an exhaustive kind of national study, but that's what we felt we needed at this time. This is just a quick sense so you understand who took part. It's about 50-50 in terms of men and women, mostly people in their 60s, but also people in their 50s and 70s. Most of these people have children, but most over the age of 18 tend to lean more liberal. You can see some of the locations, primarily in the Northeast and other parts of the country, heavy on the Reform conservative end, but certainly representative groups in Orthodox, secular. So, by and large, about what we would want in terms of the kind of key demographics. Here's some of the things we learned. And again, this is just a quick few pieces that we pulled, knowing that we've got 30 minutes to do this, and we want to take some questions. So most of the people who responded are not retired. We've got about a third who are, but most are not. And interestingly, in the questions on the right, we asked them kind of about their plans over the next 5 years. And what kind of jumps out here is over the next 5 years, most are not planning to stop working, right? And what's driving that exactly, purpose or finances or whatnot, but people are really staying engaged in their career or, active. That's the other part that comes up here. And I know that the last speakers kind of bashed on that idea of being active, but certainly I think that what we'll see here is that, yes, people are watching TVs and the movies and whatever, but they are really active. They're involved in lots of things, exercise, going out to eat, traveling, performances, concerts, plays, religious learning, gardening, pickleball, volunteering. There's a lot there that people are involved in. And when it comes to Jewish volunteering, it's about a third of the folks, maybe a little less than a third, volunteering with Jewish organizations. And, what we also see is that by and large, this is a group that's feeling pretty comfortable with their sense of self right now, and feeling, that they have a meaningful purpose in life. Granted, you'll see the gray and the blue there hint at those who are more neutral or who disagree, but that big green line in each question are those who are feeling comfortable with my sense of self and place in the world and having a meaning and purpose in life. And when you look at Jewish engagement, which we'll come to in a minute, those who are engaged Jewishly tend to also come out in that strongly agree category more than others, right? So the more engaged people are Jewishly, they're agreeing with these sentiments even more. I'm not suggesting causation or anything else necessarily, but just nonetheless a connection that's important to keep note of. And also kind of looking forward, right? How they feel right now was the last slide, and then looking forward. These are generally folks who are telling us that they're looking forward. Heavily, 66% agree that I'm excited to try new things and experience new facets in life. So kind of more and more of the same old is probably not the right strategy with this demographic. And these are people who are looking forward to kind of more flexibility and freedom. Certainly, I'm not discrediting those in the gray and the blue here, but by and large, we have a pretty optimistic, forward-looking demographic. And again, those who are more engaged in Jewish life tend to fall in the strongly agree on these, and women in the younger category of 55 to 64 as well. So just to kind of also give you a sense, though, we don't want to discredit that there are those also with fears. And so what we did here was kind of call out those who feel very worried. You'll see that it's not the majority, it's not even half, but there is a segment here, the blue categories, that show up as feeling worried about the future. And some of the things that they're worried about is having to work more than I want to, feeling lonely or isolated, losing independence, not being physically close to family, taking care of my parents or older family members, right? Not feeling needed. These are kind of showing up high here as like, if there are things that are worrisome to this category, these are some of them. And on the having to work more than I want to, I think a theme that we're certainly hearing in our conversations is this is both about caring for aging parents as well as their children being less independent than they had maybe planned, and then feeling the pressure of needing to work longer to help compensate for that. So when we turn to Jewish engagement, and again, I'm trying to go quickly through this, these are just high-level highlights. What we see here is an audience that half are not engaged in Jewish life, and we've got about, maybe a little less than a quarter who are very engaged, but half are not engaged, and we used a very broad definition of engaged, so you could kind of almost count anything, and half indicated that they're not. But I think what's interesting here is 71% of those who are not said that they would want to be or are open to being engaged. And so that here in my mind is such an opportunity when we think about who's the largest demographic in our community. Are they engaged? Half of them clearly are not. It may even be higher in certain places. And of those not involved, many of them, the majority of them want to be. And that's kind of our call to action in my mind. Similarly, when you get to questions of feeling a sense of belonging in the Jewish community and feeling fulfilled by the Jewish community, we also have a gap there. And whether this is part of the reason why people aren't as engaged, if you don't feel you belong, you don't feel fulfilled by it, why would you participate, right? So I think that there's questions here for us, the same we've wrestled with young adults, of how do we create more inclusive spaces where people really feel they belong and where we inspire a sense of fulfillment in those experiences. So to kind of summarize these, we've got 50% of the population not engaged, could be higher in some places, and certainly less than half reporting a sense of belonging or fulfillment by their involvement. And on the upside, the good news here is those not involved are open to it. And so what are they open to? What can we look to? That's kind of coming up next. Just a quick touch point on congregational affiliation, which shows up in some of the questions. The people who responded to this study, which again is meant to be representative of a national view, you've got about half who are members of a congregation or synagogue. Interestingly, though, while about half are members, the other half are not. Those who are members, less than half of those report feeling connected to their synagogue or that they regularly participate in any way. So while we may have, I still think it's a relatively low number if we want to think of a rich Jewish life, and we often assume that this demographic is really involved in Jewish community or in Jewish life. It's relatively low. You've still got about half who are members. It's not that high. And of those, only less than half are not feeling connected. So that's pretty important for us to take note of. Another piece that we looked into, and I'm just highlighting it here because I think it's important, and it's certainly something we focused on in building young adult programming that was successful, is around friendships. And we know with this audience that companionship and friendship is important. And here again, this is about their feelings for the future. We've got about a third of folks who are not feeling so confident that they're going to have friends in the next phase of their life. And we've got over half, the 54% on the right-hand side there, who are looking for more ways to meet other people at a similar stage, right? So half are not feeling confident about having the friends, and more than half are looking for ways to meet people. And we also know another question we asked was around having Jewish friends specifically, and 43% said that they would like to meet other Jews. And the reason I'm calling this out is that I think we don't do enough to kind of market the real, we talk about community, but community almost creates an allergic reaction like the word religion or faith does. So, there's real social capital in being involved in Jewish programming and the Jewish community. And this is where you can meet friends. And I think that that's something people are looking for and are nervous about, and we can certainly provide that. And what we can also see here in the data was that those less involved in the Jewish community are the ones less confident about having friends. And those who had more Jewish friends also show up as being more engaged. So friendships is just something really important for us to think about when we design programming. And kind of further to like what people are looking for. Again, it's about, a significant number here are looking for ways to meet people, looking to ways to meet other Jewish people. And in terms of things that we heard of what's holding them back, people are seeking opportunities to engage closer to home. The feedback we heard was that a lot of Jewish programming isn't designed well for their stage of life, often requiring them to go too far afield, often at times of day that's inconvenient, or requiring driving at night showed up as a significant barrier. So if we can think about how do we design experiences that really match what someone's day looks like and create them to be more accessible, then we might have a better chance of reaching them. We also certainly heard that a lot of the experiences just aren't resonating with them. So if they're not resonating with you and then they're far away and it's at night, why would you participate? Why would you show up, right? So if we can try to tie those pieces together. And what we heard from people is that they're definitely seeking opportunities for more secular or diverse expressions of Jewish identity. We saw in here that those who identify as being more secular Jewish felt that they weren't welcome in a lot of Jewish spaces because they were too secular or kind of too culturally Jewish. So how do we be more inclusive and more diverse? Travel showed up as something that they're really interested. Social, cultural events, volunteerism, these all showed up as things that people were interested in. This shows a huge survey here of just kind of activities in the future that they're interested in. Traveling showing up very high, spending time with grandchildren, exercise, reading, exploring new hobbies, right? New things shows up high. And I didn't include it here out of the interest of time, but what I'll say, just because it connects to the earlier conversation, is that we tested a few program models that we're specifically interested in to see what resonated the most. And to the idea of kind of a volunteer core, we tested 3 concepts to kind of see which gelled the most. And certainly the idea of encore careers and volunteerism really resonated with this audience. Immersive experiences was also very high. And then we looked at kind of really hyper-local engagement models. But those 2 around travel, as well as that kind of purpose-based volunteerism encore career, really showed up high for people. But to kind of close out, I think again, this is meant as like a quick hit, so you can see some of the themes showing up in the data. But I think that we have a long ways to go in terms of reaching this audience, a very important audience, and that this is a time to really innovate, to collaborate, and to think about what models can reach scale. And all of the lessons we've learned from the young adult space of more data, of piloting new models, being more innovative, being more inclusive, really designing for the user, that's all of the things that we need to do in this space as well. And I think when we do it well, what the data also shows is that engaging in Jewish life really offers an opportunity for people to feel more optimistic about the years ahead, right? So there's a connection here between Jewishly involved and feeling optimistic about my life feeling optimistic about my purpose in the world. And I think that is really something that we need to remember and kind of go deep on, is that connection, and that's our call to action in my mind. And certainly from a Federation perspective, that's what we really want to double down on. I'm going to stop sharing. And I think I hit my time requirements. But those are just a few of the highlights, and really open to any questions or comments. Jess, if I'm allowed to take them, I'll follow your lead.
Yes, for sure. And Sarah, thank you so much. You beautiful job. So let's, I really encourage to the audience, if you want to electronically raise your hand, we'll call upon you. We'd love to start to hear some of our audience voices here today. Or, we can try to take yourself off mute. But please, if you have a question, a comment, what's resonating. And then I also think there's some questions in the chat or comments we can start with, Sarah, too. But let me pause. Does anybody want to be brave and take themselves off mute and ask a question? This is really our time to build community.
I see Rabbi Karen.
Okay, beautiful, because I do not. So Rabbi Karen, can you take yourself off mute?
I'm trying.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm wondering, in terms of funding through Federation, what percentage of your funding is going towards this demographic? I worked in the field of adult Jewish learning for 13 years before starting my own business, and funding was not filtering towards adults. So I wonder how the shift is showing up with your dollars.
Yeah, and look, the honest answer is, on a local level, we're not entirely sure, because everyone counts in different ways. So it's one of the things that we're looking into is to better understand, how where the dollars are going. But I will say that the dollars that are in this space are likely probably more in the services space than the engagement area. We're beginning to see examples of that change, right? So I see Melissa from Palm Beach on the Palm Beach Federation. So we're seeing examples of that change, of federations beginning to invest in that. New York Federation has the Verve 55 program. I hope you'll go and hear Kayla later on. Melissa in Palm Beach, they're doing tons of work around volunteerism, but also bringing One Table into the community and the grandparents network. So you're beginning to see lots of examples. Baltimore's been doing this work for a long time, right? So you're beginning to see more and more communities not only invest in services, but also in the engagement space. But certainly there's a ways to go. And I see Rabbi Brian.
I just had a question about, you mentioned immersive experiences, or related to that. I'm just wondering what kind of innovation have you seen in terms of immersive experiences for modern agers, for older adults? That, is it, are we trying to replicate things that have been, created and have been done for millennials now for several years, and like those kinds of things? Or is there something more unique that is more geared to this particular age group? I mean, we've been doing a program for a couple of years where we have our older adults matched with high school students in Jerusalem practicing English together over Zoom. And we just had our first trip to Israel, bringing many of them over to meet their Israeli high school peers, partners for the first time, and also did touring components. And that kind of both travel, that people want to do travel anyways, and also connected to an ongoing experience that people have been having, and the personal connections seem to work well. And now we're trying to figure out, well, what kind of other kinds of immersive experiences, travel experiences, local experiences should we try to do? And also, is there anybody who's funding these kinds of things, so we're not just limited to people who can pay full cost for them?
Great question. So a couple things. One, I haven't seen anyone who's specifically funding for this audience in kind of a major significant way. That doesn't mean that we can't change that. I haven't also seen a tremendous amount of compelling offerings in this space around immersive travel yet either, that might change that. So that's something we're certainly interested in. A couple things I would share. One is there is an organization called Finding North that has done some interesting work around travel for this population to Israel, as well as kind of a gardening experience in Kansas City. So it's kind of a up and coming organization, but they've been doing some interesting work about how do you design for this audience. And someone asked the question in the chat around what is an immersive experience. And certainly, I think what we're trying to draw attention to are these kind of retreat-like multi-day experiences, whether local or abroad, where significant hours are really spent not just around touring or leisure, but really invested in learning. Can be around volunteerism, right? So there's a whole model around like what makes an experience immersive, but certainly that depth and intensity and the group cohort experience are some of the things that we look at. And some of the other things, for example, the Modern Elder Academy runs these retreats out of their center, not that aren't Jewishly oriented. We are piloting for the first time, a Jewish experience with them, where the curriculum will be infused by Jewish values and wisdom, right? So we want to test it out. We want to see what it looks like, right? Could this be something we could do more of? Or what can we learn from them in designing uniquely Jewish immersive experiences that focus on this transition period of life? And I look at this a lot of what we've done in the young adult space around travel, think of Birthright and other major investments. And I come from building kind of the largest global service program for young adults. And a lot of the lessons that we learned there, I think, can be applied here, which is really, again, about designing for the audience and not just assuming people want to go on a tour, right? I think they want that deep learning experience. So we're looking at some of those. I think it's really early, but I think Finding North is interesting. I think the Modern Elder Academy is certainly really interesting. We're going to try and test a few things, and we're happy to brainstorm and collaborate with folks and play around with ideas.
Sarah, that's so helpful. And let me just address one thing, as you're also, I know we're both scanning questions in real time. We have a minute, one more minute or so, but if anybody else wants to raise their hand, I wanted to say there's a question about, will these slides be shared? Certainly this recording, you will see the slide itself. There was an article about this research in the forward. We can also send you that link that really succinctly captures it. Sarah, anything else to say about the research?
Yeah, we will make available a link to the actual slide so you can spend some more time with it. We're just a little behind on the production piece of that, but that will happen. Okay. So that we'll do that. And I just want to call out, I don't know, Jim Eisenberg, if you wanted to ask a very quick question. I saw your hand waving around. Okay, maybe not. Okay.
Okay. And again, if you do want to speak going forward, just take yourself off mute. Sarah, thank you hugely for this. And I just want to underscore something you said about, is that you, Jim?
Oh, that's Jim.
It is me.
Okay, fabulous. Please, Jim.
Just quickly, I started an organization in New York called Grandpa's United. We're in 5 cities. I was part of Co-Generate and an early Encore fellow. I have a background long ago being involved in a synagogue, but listening here, I think it might be an opportunity to connect, hopefully, with you. I don't know who I might talk to about starting Grandpa's United. We do a lot of mentoring, and I'm a PhD, whatever, from Cal Berkeley, and I've been involved in mentoring first-generation students, which I think could have a tremendous impact for Jewish grandpas and alumni working across the country. So if somebody could tell me who you talk to, if you're open to it, I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Yeah, sure. Jim, first of all, you went to Berkeley, so did I. So now
you did. Okay.
Now we have to speak. I'm happy to pop my email. Yeah, go Bears. I'm happy to pop my email in the chat. And if you look at there and would love to hear about your experience as an Encore fellow, because we're looking at Encore career models for the Jewish community and trying to learn from everything that Mark has done over at Co-Generate. So
I was in first innovation fellow. I was the oldest.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I'll
Jim.
send it. Thank you. Sorry.
No, not at all. This is your time. Sarah, huge thank you to you. And I just wanted to underscore what you said about that sense of belonging. And it kind of circles back to what Ken and Jay were saying as well, which is there is such, belonging is about being seen, heard, and needed. It's about being needed, deep roots of belonging. And I think what I love about what the research is saying, what all of our field practitioners are doing with their programming models, is how do we help older Jewish adults feel needed in meaningful ways, tapping their strengths, their wisdom. So that research was incredibly helpful. Thank you for this, Sarah. And we're now going to